So, we're going to start off our show today and we're going to talk about recent developments in the OpenRan market. And really, what we're going to start talking about, and I know it's something that Ron's really dialed in on, is the whole rise of rip and replace in the United States. And we've got some new rip and replace deals that were announced this last month. And so, we kind of want to look at those and get some key takeaways on, what's going on there with rip and replace, Ron. So, dive in and tell us a little bit more about that.
Right on. Yes. Rip and replace is rising. And there's 1.9 billion reasons for this. First of all, when Congress passed the COVID-19 relief funding to the tune of about $1 trillion, it also included what is now called the Secure and Trusted Communications Networks Act. And that's allocated funding for what is called the RIP and Replace program, now being administered by the FCC. And the FCC is allocating funds to mostly independent and regional carriers throughout the US to replace equipment from Huawei and ZTE. And a little background, there are actually over 1,300 independent telcos in the US. So the US market's rather distinct, and many of them are definitely very good at servicing their localities. They actually are high touch. They are very prioritizing, having the best equipment that they can use to serve their customers. And so this is actually a very important opportunity for, the ecosystem, and,
Right.
specifically suppliers like Nokia, Ericsson, Mavenir, and Adtran. All of them have been involved in, the development of the RIP and Replace program, how the legislation was worded. And the other reasons why Rip and Replace is taking off is that, in addition to the government funding it, there's also a provision that it has to be comprehensively done, meaning you have to rip and replace all the Huawei equipment, all the ZTE equipment. You can't, just pick some of the equipment and be selective about it. And there's also currently right now a 1-year provision. And so that is a tight timetable for many of these smaller carriers, even with their capabilities. And as a result, we're seeing an acceleration in terms of, okay, how can we get on this bandwagon? Can we meet this tight 1-year timetable? And I
Right.
think it's important to note that when this was developed, Nokia advocated extending that 1-year timetable, and I believe that that will end up happening. But for now, the FCC is sticking to the 1-year timetable. Let's see how this develops, and then we can see if we need to do 6-month or 12-month extensions. Because it's one thing to replace, for example, the core, the mobile core. That could take 6 to 8 months. That's relatively more straightforward. However, replacing the RAN components and replacing the back office components, such as the OSS and BSS processes, that can take more time and could exceed the 12-month limit. So this is something that's definitely percolating. For example, Ericsson indicated that in working with the 100 plus independent telcos that they're engaged with, that about 40% of it is a rip and replace effort, and they anticipate that number to increase naturally as there's more momentum, as more carriers board onto this program. So it's definitely something that we are definitely going to be watching. And to your point, Shelly, about some of the recent deals, one was Mavenir. One Triangle Communications in Montana, their rip and replace effort. And that actually is interesting because not only are they supplying both the hardware and the software components, because Mavenir is a relatively new entrant to the hardware side of supplying RAN equipment, specifically OpenRan. So this is a feather in the cap, but it's also specific to the fixed wireless access deployments of Triangle. And so this is indicating that OpenRan in the early stages of rip and replace will have a role. Now, on the
Yeah.
other hand, we anticipate that most of the rip and replace will rely mostly on traditional RAN technologies, at least in the early stages, the good majority of it. For example, Nokia's deal with Union Wireless, based in Wyoming, that was both equipment and services. So we can anticipate that some carriers will be interested in working with a major supplier that can also provide the services to ease, this transition.
Right.
And so, yeah, well, definitely be looking forward to seeing more rip and replace headlines over the course of the rest of this year and well into 2022. And so this is definitely something that is putting OpenRan, but also mobile transition technology into the headlines.
Absolutely. Well, very interesting stuff and much more ahead, right?
No doubt. Yeah, I think what's also important to note is that rip and replace is U.S. Specific, but there's also concern about how much impact can Open RAN have if the suppliers aren't fully aligned with supporting 3G and 2G, because almost all the headlines related to Open RAN are related to supporting 4G and 5G networks. Open RAN is actually very much aligned with 5G specifications. That is, relying on virtualization, separating the control plane and the user plane, using disaggregated networking techniques. And so it's very well suited for that. However, backward compatibility is important.
Right.
And as a result, last year, for example, Mavenir bought a company called IP Access just to address this backward compatibility.
Right.
Another Open RAN supplier, Parallel Wireless, made a good deal of headway and differentiation by touting that capability. And just this month, Mavenir took that extra step of ensuring 2G backward compatibility for Open RAN, because for one thing, there's still 2G connections in North America and the US to this
Right.
day, as well as Europe. But more importantly, in other parts, including India and Africa and Asia, there are at least a billion plus 2G connections out there.
Right.
And so for Open RAN to really have much impact on a global basis, you really need to have that built-in backward compatibility.
Yeah.
And so this is actually a very encouraging development to see, the suppliers upping their game and making sure that Open RAN can fulfill all of the G's in terms of, being able to work with the existing networks out there.
Ron, I can always count on you for the clever nuggets, fulfill all of the G's.
It's a G thing, yes.